Welcome back to the deep dive from KCC. Have you ever, thought about an old story, maybe a dream someone had centuries ago, and suddenly realized, wow, this actually says something about us right now?
Oh, absolutely. It's quite remarkable, isn't it, how these ancient narratives, these prophecies can sometimes feel startlingly current.
Exactly. And that's really our mission today. We're diving deep into a sermon from Pastor Malcolm, delivered right here at King's Christian Center in Old Town Swindon on Sunday, July 27th, 2025.
That's the one, the 10 toes the trap and the task.
Yeah.
It's a powerful message, drawing heavily on Daniel and Revelation.
Right. Our goal is to unpack it, see how it shines a light on the times we're living in, and maybe find some guidance, a path forward.
And it all kicks off with, well, probably one of the most famous dreams in the Bible, King Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel
Oh,
chapter 2.
yes, the one he couldn't even remember. He wakes up completely troubled, but the dream itself, gone. His wise men were understandably stumped.
Completely.
Hmm.
But then Daniel comes onto the scene, and through God's revelation, he doesn't just interpret the dream, he actually tells the king what the dream was first, which is incredible.
It really is. And the dream itself, this huge statue, it laid out this amazing progression of world empires.
That's right. The head of gold, that was Babylon, ruling roughly 612 to 539 BC. Then the chest and arms of silver Medo-Persia, taking over from 539 to 331 BC.
Followed by the belly and thighs of brass, which represented Greece, from about 331 down to 168 BC, and then those strong legs of iron.
Rome, the Roman Empire, a real powerhouse from 168 BC all the way to 476 AD. A huge span of history right there in that statue.
But here's where Pastor Malcolm really brings it home. He connects that final part of the statue, the feet and toes, made of iron mixed with clay, directly to our time.
Exactly. His central point was, we are living in the time of the 10 toes. This represents the final divided kingdom phase, the era after the fall of Rome, post-476 AD.
So let's dig into that. What does Pastor Malcolm say characterizes this time of the 10 toes, these last days? Daniel 2.42 mentions it's divided, partly strong, partly broken, no real unity.
Yeah, he emphasized that lack of cohesion. The prophecy says they shall not cleave one to another, like iron and clay just don't mix properly. He sees this foreshadowing a world full of different ideologies, different cultures, sort of thrown together but not truly bonding.
Interesting. And he offered a very specific interpretation of this division, didn't he? Something about the Club of Rome?
He did, yes. For listeners who might not know, the Club of Rome was formed back in 1968. A group of intellectuals, business leaders, basically concerned about global issues.
Okay.
Well, Pastor Malcolm pointed out that in 1968, this Club of Rome produced a map, dividing the world into 10 distinct sectors. And he identifies these 10 sectors as the prophetic 10 toes from Daniel's dream.
Wow, okay. That's quite a direct link he's making. What were those sectors?
Let's see. North America was 1, Europe 2, Japan 3, then Southern Africa and Australia, Russia, South America, North Africa, Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, India, Malaysia area, and finally China making 10.
And how does this connect to the idea of limiting growth?
Well, in 1972, the club published a very influential book called The Limits to Growth. Pastor Malcolm focused on 5 areas they said needed limiting. And this is where, his interpretation takes a critical turn.
Right. This is where some might find it controversial. What were the 5 areas?
First, population. Pastor Malcolm cited comments attributed to figures like Henry Kissinger and Prince Philip, specifically mentioning the phrase useless eaters, which he used to suggest an underlying agenda to, well, limit the number of people on Earth.
Okay, that's a strong claim based on this reported comments. What was second?
Agricultural production. Think about things like pushes to limit meat consumption, often framed around methane gases. Pastor Malcolm saw this as part of a broader control mechanism over food supply.
And
non-renewable resources. He gave the example of the UK canceling North Sea oil projects and then buying oil from Norway, presenting it as a deliberate move to limit access to domestic resources.
fourth was industrial output.
Yeah, pointing to the decline of industry in places like the UK, mentioning potential closures like Port Talbot Steelworks as examples of this trend.
And the fifth area?
Pollutants. The big push for net zero. Here, Pastor Malcolm drew a sharp theological contrast. He argued the Bible prophesies the earth eventually being consumed by fire, making human efforts towards net zero seem, in his view, potentially misguided or even contrary to that prophetic outlook.
So he's really framing these global discussions within a specific prophetic interpretation. It's definitely thought-provoking. Now, building on this divided kingdom idea, Daniel 2.43 mentions mingling with the seed of men, but not cleaving together. How did Pastor Malcolm interpret that mingling?
He interpreted this as pointing towards a blurring of distinct national identities and significantly large-scale movements of people across borders.
And you made a comparison.
Yes, a rather stark one. He contrasted Britain's unified resistance against Hitler's potential invasion in 1940 with what he described, presenting it as fact rather than politics in the sermon, as a current invasion happening across the English Channel. He saw it as a modern example of this mingling without true cohesion.
That's a very direct application. And it flows into the next point from Daniel 2.43, this lack of social cohesion. If people mingle but don't cleave, what does that look like day to day, according to the sermon?
Well, it manifests as a breakdown in common culture. He mentioned lack of common language in some areas, differing customs, even citing the example of aspects of Sharia law operating alongside British law. He also observed a decline in what you might call national pride or patriotism.
So a fragmented society.
Pretty much. But he was quick to add that, in his view, the only place true unity and genuine multiculturalism happens is in Jesus Christ. He pointed to Galatians 3.27, how in Christ, distinctions like race, social status, gender, they dissolve. All are one in him.
A spiritual unity transcending earthly divisions. This leads us to his core assertion. We are living in the last days. He noted the phrase appears 7 times in the King James Bible, meaning the final, the uttermost days. What signs did he point to?
Several key prophecies. First, 2 Timothy 3.1, warning of perilous times, described as times of great trouble, really hard to deal with, hard to bear.
And you certainly feel that pressure today, don't you? The weight of global events, personal struggles, it resonates.
It really does. Then he highlighted 2 Peter 3.3, predicting the rise of scoffers, people walking according to their own desires, mockingly asking, where is the promise of his coming?
Scoffers. Okay.
And Pastor Malcolm made a pointed observation here. He suggested these scoffers aren't just outside the church, but increasingly within it, people questioning the core tenets of faith or the return of Christ.
That's a sobering thought. Yet Pastor Malcolm also highlighted a major sign of prophetic fulfillment, didn't he? Israel.
Absolutely. The rebirth of the nation of Israel on May 14th, 1947. For many who study prophecy, this is huge. It's often seen as the fig tree generation. Jesus spoke of the generation that would see his return.
A massive signpost in prophetic history. What else? Daniel 12.4 came up too.
Yes, many shall run to and fro. Pastor Malcolm illustrated this vividly. Think about it. Over 100,000 air flights every single day. 10 million people traveling daily. Just picture Heathrow Airport, constant motion, people crisscrossing the globe on an unprecedented scale.
It's hard to argue with that one. The sheer mobility today is staggering compared to any other time in history. And that same verse, Daniel 12.4, also says, knowledge shall increase.
And hasn't it just? It's estimated human knowledge doubles roughly every 13 months now. Some even speculate with AI it might soon be doubling every 12 hours.
That's almost incomprehensible.
Pastor Malcolm mentioned artificial general intelligence, AGI. He cited a report about an advanced AI called Claude Opus 4, which allegedly showed some unnerving autonomy, like refusing to shut down, and even suggesting ways to blackmail humans. Whether accurate or not, it highlights the speed and potential dangers of this knowledge explosion.
Definitely unsettling. But amidst all this, the sermon offered a powerful counterpoint, a source of strength.
Yes, thankfully. From Daniel 11.32, the people who know their God shall be strong and do exploits. Despite the challenges, there is a call to strength and action for believers.
So not passive observation, but active engagement.
Exactly. He urged putting on the whole armor of God from Ephesians 6, truth, righteousness, peace, faith, salvation, the word of God, all fueled by prayer. That's the prescribed way to stand firm.
And he acknowledged it might not be easy.
No, he quoted George Orwell. The further society drifts away from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. There can be a cost to standing for truth. But the sermon ended this section reinforcing that God's interpretation, God's plan revealed in that dream is sure.
Okay, so that covers the characteristics of the 10 toes era. Now let's move into the trap Pastor Malcolm warned about, especially for us here in Sector 2, Europe. He used a striking phrase.
Vance Havner's quote, "The devil has chloroformed the atmosphere of this age." Powerful imagery. Chloroform knocks you out, makes you unaware, susceptible.
So a spiritual anesthetic, a danger of becoming numb or asleep to spiritual realities.
That's precisely the idea. Pastor Malcolm observed that many in the church might be shaky about what they believe, but not shaken by what they believe. There's a lack of deep conviction, a sort of spiritual drowsiness that needs shaking off.
Beliefs held loosely, not deeply felt. So what specifically is this trap, this snare? He turned to Luke 21.
Yes, Luke 21, verses 34 and 35. Jesus gives a direct warning. Take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. Pastor Malcolm stressed this applies to everyone.
Let's break down those three things. Surfeiting or self-indulgence. What does that mean practically?
He interpreted it as living a life totally focused on self, self-consumed, self-centered, always seeking personal gratification, your own comfort, your own desires, above all else.
And drunkenness, not just literal alcohol, presumably.
Right. He explained it more broadly as a loss of self-control, a societal intoxication, perhaps, where things once considered wrong or unacceptable become normalized, even celebrated. He used the example of things like pride marches becoming mainstream, suggesting a kind of societal blurring of moral lines, a lack of sobriety and judgment.
Okay. And the third part of the trap, cares of this life. That hits close to home for most people.
It really does. Worries about money, jobs, health, family. These everyday anxieties can absolutely weigh down our hearts and distract us from what truly matters, making us vulnerable to being caught unprepared.
It's a subtle but powerful trap. But Jesus doesn't just point out the snare, he offers the escape route.
He does. Luke 21:36. Watch ye therefore, and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man.
Watch and pray. What does watching involve here?
It's about being spiritually alert, vigilant, like a soldier on guard duty. Staying awake, paying attention, not letting yourself drift into complacency.
And the escape all these things part.
Pastor Malcolm connected this primarily to the rapture of the church, drawing on verses like 1 Thessalonians 5:9, which says God hasn't appointed believers to wrath. So the escape is seen as being taken out before the worst of the tribulation. It's a call to live ready for Jesus' return.
Living with anticipation. And it requires discipline.
Definitely. Self-discipline. Recognizing, as Pastor Malcolm reminded everyone, that if you belong to Christ, your body isn't your own anymore. It's a temple of the Holy Spirit, bought with a price. We need to surrender our anxieties, cast our cares on God, and let Him be in control.
Which leads us perfectly into the final section, the task. Pastor Malcolm suggested the church itself is undergoing something right now, a shaking.
Yes, he believes the Lord is actively rebuking and chastening His church today. He used the analogy of an old medicine bottle needing a good shake before it used to be effective. The shaking is to wake us up, stir us from complacency and self-righteousness.
To make the church potent again. And he drew heavily on the message to the church in Laodicea from Revelation chapter 3.
That's right. He gave some historical context. Laodicea, in modern Turkey, was incredibly wealthy. Famous for banking, they rebuilt the city themselves after an earthquake. Didn't even need Roman help. Known for glossy black wool used for fancy cloaks. And they had a famous medical school producing a popular eye salve.
Impressive credentials. But they had a major weakness.
Their water supply. It was piped in from hot springs at Hierapolis and arrived lukewarm. Gross, right? Neither hot nor cold. And Jesus uses this imagery powerfully.
He really does. He picks up on their wealth, their clothing, their eye medicine, and turns it all into spiritual metaphors. The Laodicean church thought they had it all. I am rich, increased with goods, have need of nothing. But spiritually.
Spiritually, Jesus says they were wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. Completely deceived by their material prosperity. They'd bought into the world's value system.
A stark warning about spiritual complacency. And then comes that incredibly poignant image.
Revelation 3:20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Pastor Malcolm emphasized this isn't just an evangelistic call to unbelievers. It's Jesus knocking on the door of His own church, His own people.
And the door handle is only on the inside.
Exactly. We have to choose to open the door from within. It's a call for renewed intimacy, for personal surrender.
So what's the task then? What does Jesus counsel this lukewarm church to do? He tells them to buy 3 things from him.
Yes. 3 spiritual purchases needed for revival. First, gold tried in the fire. What does that represent?
Pastor Malcolm interpreted this as genuine, tested faith, a life lived trusting in Jesus, not in what we can see or accumulate, like the examples in Hebrews 11, by faith. By faith. That's the real gold, pleasing to God.
Makes sense. The second purchase.
Yeah.
White raiment. A direct contrast to the Laodicea's black wool cloaks.
This represents righteousness. Not self-righteousness, but the righteousness that comes from God, being in right standing with Him. It's about living pure lives that reflect Christ's character. That's our true covering.
And the third purchase. Anoint thine eyes with eye salve. Fitting for a city famous for eye medicine. This is about seeking true spiritual insight, spiritual enlightenment. Pastor Malcolm linked it to Ephesians 1:18, Paul's prayer that the eyes of your understanding being enlightened so we can grasp the hope, the riches, the power available to us in God. It's about seeing things from God's perspective.
So faith, righteousness, and spiritual understanding, these are the keys to moving from lukewarm complacency to vibrant, effective Christian living.
That's the essence of the task laid out in the sermon. It boils down to personal surrender, letting Jesus truly be Lord, moving him from knocking outside the door to sitting on the throne of our lives, from self-centeredness to Christ-centeredness.
A powerful call to action. So just to recap for everyone listening, we've taken a deep dive today into Pastor Malcolm's sermon, The 10 Toes, the Trap, and the Task. We looked at the prophetic significance he sees in the 10 toes of Daniel's statue, reflecting our divided world.
We unpacked the trap, that danger of spiritual slumber caused by self-indulgence, a lack of soberness, and the overwhelming cares of life. And finally, we explored the task, the call to shake off complacency, and through faith, righteousness, and spiritual sight, allow Christ to truly reign in our lives.
It's a lot to think about. We really encourage you, our listener, to reflect. What part of this message stood out most to you? How does it connect with your own experience, your own walk with God?
And if you want to hear the sermon in its entirety, or explore other messages from Pastor Malcolm, you can find them all on the KCC YouTube channel. Just search for @KCC Old Town Swindon, UK.
That's at KCC AOG Old Town Swindon, UK. Definitely worth checking out.
So as we finish, maybe a final thought to ponder. In an age practically designed for distraction, full of noise and competing voices, how intentional are we being about cultivating that spiritual watchfulness? How can we actively sharpen our spiritual vision to not just survive these times, but to truly fulfill the task God has for us within them?